Hello, wonderful listeners. Welcome back to our channel where we whisk you away to worlds of imagination. Before we dive into today's tale, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let us begin our story. From meows to roars, a city cat's wild life, Jasper was, by all accounts, a cat of immense privilege. His ginger fur, the color of a sunset captured in silk, was meticulously groomed by the gentle strokes of his human's hand, a hand that also served him gourmet salmon pate and chilled spring water in a crystal bowl. His domain was a sprawling penthouse apartment, perched high above the ceaseless hum of the city, a sanctuary of plush velvet cushions, scratching posts wrapped in expensive sisal rope, and an endless array of toys designed to stimulate even the most discerning feline mind. Each morning, the sun would stream through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming his favorite napping spot on a chaise lounge, from which he could survey the miniature world below, tiny cars like beetles scuttling on asphalt lanes, and ant-sized people rushing to their unknown destinations. Life for Jasper was a predictable symphony of comfort, dawn naps followed by a light breakfast, a vigorous session of chasing the elusive red dot of a laser pointer, an afternoon spent observing the pigeons from behind a pane of glass, a frustrating yet endlessly fascinating pastime, and then a decadent dinner before curling up at the foot of his human's bed, purring himself to sleep. Yet, beneath the veneer of this opulent existence, a quiet restlessness stirred within Jasper's chest. It was a subtle thrum, a faint echo of something wild and untamed that occasionally pricked his consciousness, usually during the quietest hours of the night when the city's roar softened to a distant whisper. His human, a kind but rather preoccupied woman named Eleanor, believed Jasper to be the happiest cat in the world. And in many ways he was. He loved Eleanor, her soft voice, her comforting scent, the way she scratched just behind his ears. But her world, his world, felt ... small, confined. He often pressed his nose against the cool glass of the windows, his emerald eyes tracing the flight of sparrows, envying their effortless freedom, their mastery of the boundless sky. He watched the stray cats in the park below, lean and quick, moving with a purpose he couldn't quite comprehend from his lofty perch. They seemed to possess a secret knowledge, a raw vitality that was absent from his own pampered routine. One rainy afternoon, while Eleanor was engrossed in a particularly intense documentary about African wildlife, Jasper found himself mesmerized by the screen. A lion, magnificent and powerful, stalked silently through tall savanna grasses, its eyes burning with an ancient fire. The sheer power, the unbridled independence, the instinctual grace of the creature resonated deeply within Jasper. He saw himself in that lion's gaze, not literally, of course, but he felt a kinship, a recognition of a dormant spirit. The lion let out a thunderous roar that vibrated through the apartment, rattling the very air around Jasper. A jolt, primal and undeniable, shot through him. He was a cat, yes, but could there be a roar hidden within his own gentle meow? Could a creature of such comfort ever truly know the wild? That night, as the rain lashed against the windows and the city lights blurred into streaks of color, Jasper's dreams were no longer of laser pointers and salmon pate. They were of vast open spaces, of the thrill of the hunt and the potent, exhilarating taste of freedom. The velvet cage, once a symbol of security, now felt like a gilded prison. A new, audacious desire had taken root in his heart, to find his own roar. The morning after his vivid dreams, a strange energy coursed through Jasper. The usual allure of his sunbeam-warmed chaise lounge felt diminished, the gourmet breakfast less appealing. The city outside, once a distant, abstract painting, now beckoned with an irresistible, almost magnetic pull. Eleanor, sensing his unusual restlessness, offered extra cuddles and a new squeaky toy. But Jasper merely tolerated them, his gaze fixed on the apartment's main door, a barrier that had always seemed insurmountable. Today, however, it looked less like a fortress and more like a challenge. The opportunity presented itself later that afternoon. Eleanor, rushing to an important meeting, left the door ajar for a moment too long, distracted by a last-minute phone call. For a pampered cat like Jasper, whose entire existence revolved around the carefully controlled environment of the penthouse, this was an unprecedented breach of security. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated instinct. Without a second thought, without a backward glance at his velvet cushions or his crystal water bowl, Jasper slipped through the narrow opening. The world outside the apartment door was a dizzying assault on his senses. The hushed, carpeted hallway of the building was a brief reprieve, but then came the elevator, a terrifying metal box that whisked him downwards with an unnerving lurch. When the lobby doors hissed open, revealing the grand entrance of the building, Jasper hesitated. The sheer scale of the outside world was overwhelming. The air was thick with 1,000 new smells, exhaust fumes, damp earth, stale coffee, and something wild and pungent that made his whiskers twitch. Sounds, once muted by thick glass, now assailed him from every direction. The incessant honking of cars, the distant wail of sirens, the chatter of human voices, and the unsettling flapping of pigeons taking flight. It was a cacophony that made his ears flatten and his tail tuck in. But the urge to explore, the burning curiosity ignited by the Lion documentary, was stronger than his fear. He darted out, a ginger blur, past a startled doorman, and plunged headfirst into the chaotic symphony of the city streets. His first moments on the pavement were a terrifying dance of survival. He narrowly avoided the crushing wheels of a taxi, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. The concrete felt harsh and cold beneath his sensitive paws, a stark contrast to the plush rugs of his home. He kept to the shadows, a small, vulnerable predator in a world of giants, his emerald eyes wide with a mix of terror and exhilaration. He found himself in a narrow alleyway, a canyon of brick walls reeking of garbage and dampness. It was a far cry from the manicured gardens he had observed from above. Here, the air was thick with the scent of discarded food, stale rain, and the unmistakable musk of other animals. He saw a scrawny, battle-scarred tomcat dart into a dark corner, its eyes glowing with suspicion. Jasper, never having encountered another cat outside of a carefully curated pet store, felt a primal tremor of fear. This was not the elegant lion of his dreams. This was the brutal, unforgiving reality of the urban wild. He was cold, hungry, and profoundly alone. As night descended, casting long, menacing shadows, Jasper huddled beneath an overflowing dumpster, the metallic clang of a distant trash truck echoing like a thunderclap. He shivered, not just from the cold, but from the realization that his adventure had begun, and there was no turning back. The first step had been taken, and the meow of his pampered past was already fading, replaced by the silent, desperate prayer of a creature learning to survive. Jasper's first few days in the urban wild were a brutal education. The constant gnawing of hunger, the persistent chill, and the ever-present threat of danger were a shocking contrast to his former life. He quickly learned that the city, for all its towering buildings and bright lights, was a labyrinth of hidden perils. Cars were monstrous, roaring beasts, humans were unpredictable giants, and other animals, once distant curiosities, were now rivals or predators. He scavenged for scraps, his delicate palate quickly adapting to anything remotely edible, a discarded crust of pizza, a half-eaten hot dog, even the occasional fallen French fry. His once sleek fur began to lose its sheen, his body growing leaner, more wiry, his movements quicker and more cautious. His true turning point came on a particularly cold evening, when a sudden downpour sent him scrambling for shelter. He found refuge beneath the rusty awning of an abandoned storefront, shivering and miserable. That's where he met Mittens. Mittens was an old, grizzled calico, her fur a patchwork of scars and matted patches, one ear permanently notched from a long-forgotten battle. Her eyes, though, held a surprising warmth, a deep wisdom that belied her rough exterior. She watched Jasper with a discerning gaze, then, with a soft murp, nudged a half-eaten piece of chicken towards him. Mittens became Jasper's unlikely mentor. She taught him the unspoken rules of the alleys, which dumpsters were fruitful on which nights, the safest paths to navigate, the telltale signs of an approaching dog, and how to blend into the shadows. "The city ain't no penthouse, kid," she'd rasped, her voice a low growl, but it's got its own kind of rhythm. "You gotta listen, really listen." She showed him how to stalk a plump, unsuspecting rat, not for sport, but for survival, teaching him patience and the precision of the pounce. Jasper, who once chased a laser dot with playful abandon, now learned the deadly seriousness of the hunt. He discovered the exhilarating rush of his own instincts kicking in, the primal satisfaction of a successful catch. He learned to recognize the subtle shifts in the wind, carrying scents from blocks away, the different calls of birds, signaling danger or opportunity, the vibrations of approaching footsteps. His senses, dulled by years of comfort, sharpened to an almost painful degree. Every rustle, every shadow, every distant siren became a piece of information, a clue in the complex puzzle of urban survival. He learned to scale fences with surprising agility, to squeeze through impossibly small gaps, and to find warmth in the most unexpected places. A sheltered nook near a restaurant as exhaust vent, or a forgotten cardboard box behind a loading dock. The fear never entirely vanished, but it transformed. It became a constant companion, a heightened state of awareness that kept him alive. He fought off a scrawny raccoon over a coveted scrap, his claws unsheathed for the first time in earnest, a surprising surge of aggression coursing through him. He found a fierce satisfaction in his own resilience, in his ability to adapt and overcome. The memory of his pampered past began to recede, replaced by the vivid, immediate demands of the present. He was no longer Eleanor's Jasper, the pampered ginger tabby. He was simply Jasper, an alley cat, a survivor, a creature of the streets. And in this harsh new existence, he was discovering a strength he never knew he possessed, a silent, internal meow that was slowly but surely beginning to grow into something more substantial, more formidable. One crisp autumn morning, a new scent drifted on the wind, distinct from the familiar urban symphony of exhaust and discarded food. It was a fresh, earthy aroma, mingled with the sweet decay of fallen leaves and the crispness of damp soil. Curious and driven by an insatiable wanderlust that had replaced his former complacency, Jasper followed the tantalizing trail. It led him away from the grimy alleyways, past bustling market streets he usually avoided, and eventually to a vast, green expanse that seemed utterly out of place amidst the concrete jungle, the city as Grand Central Park. He approached cautiously, his instincts on high alert. This was different from the small, manicured patches of grass he'd sometimes suspend his penthouse window. This was a sprawling mosaic of ancient oak trees, winding paths, thickets of bushes, and even a large, shimmering pond. It felt like stepping into another world, a wild heart beating within the city's chest. The sounds here were different too, the cheerful chirping of sparrows, the scolding chatter of squirrels, the gentle rustle of leaves underfoot. The air was cleaner, cooler, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. For the first time since leaving Eleanor's apartment, Jasper felt a profound sense of awe rather than fear. He spent hours exploring, his lean body moving silently through the undergrowth, his keen eyes observing everything. He watched a family of ducks glide serenely across the pond, their ducklings trailing behind them like a feathered procession. He saw a hawk circling high above, a silent hunter surveying its domain, and felt a strange kinship with its predatory grace. He climbed an ancient oak tree, its bark rough and textured beneath his claws, and perched on a high branch, feeling the wind ruffle his fur. From this vantage point, the city skyline, usually so imposing, seemed distant and almost benevolent, a backdrop to his newfound freedom. The park offered different lessons than the alleys. Here, survival wasn't just about scavenging for food or evading dangers. It was about understanding the delicate balance of nature, even a nature carefully cultivated within an urban setting. He learned to hunt voles and mice, the thrill of the chase in a more natural environment, invigorating his senses. He discovered hidden streams and trickling springs, their cool, clear water a welcome change from stagnant puddles. He learned to distinguish between the alarm calls of different birds, understanding that a sudden silence could be as dangerous as a loud cry. One afternoon, he found himself by a secluded grove of willow trees, their branches weeping over a quiet pool. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the water with shifting patterns of light and shadow. As he drank, he caught his reflection, no longer the pampered, plump house cat, but a lean, muscled creature with eyes that held a depth of experience. He saw the scars, the slightly matted fur, but also an undeniable strength, a fierce independence. He was a survivor, yes, but more than that, he was becoming something wilder, more connected to the ancient instincts that had once been buried under layers of luxury. The whispers of the green heart of the city were not just sounds. They were a call to his own evolving nature, a reminder that the roar he sought was not just a sound, but a state of being an awakening of the primal spirit within. And in the rustling leaves and the flowing water, Jasper felt it stirring, deep within his very core. Jasper's days in the park continued, each one a deeper immersion into his wilder self. He had mastered the art of camouflage, his ginger fur blending seamlessly with the autumn leaves and dappled sunlight. He knew every hidden trail, every sheltered nook, every tree that offered a perfect vantage point. He was no longer just an alley cat. He was a park cat, a silent guardian of his green domain, his presence respected by the squirrels and eyed cautiously by the bigger birds. Yet the city, for all its wonders, still held its dangers, and the ultimate test of his transformation was yet to come. It happened one late afternoon, as the shadows lengthened and the park began to empty of its human visitors. Jasper was stalking a particularly plump pigeon near the edge of the woods, his focus absolute, his body coiled for the pounce. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl ripped through the air, vibrating through the ground beneath his paws. It wasn't the snarl of a small stray dog or the territorial hiss of another cat. This was something far larger, far more menacing. From the dense thicket emerged a hulking, scarred pit bull, its eyes narrowed with predatory intent, its powerful frame radiating raw aggression. It was a dog known to the park's wild inhabitants as Brutus, a fearsome, untamed beast that ruled the outer fringes with an iron paw. Jasper froze, every instinct screaming at him to flee. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. This was a battle he could not win with stealth or agility alone. Brutus was bigger, stronger, and clearly accustomed to dominating. The dog let out another growl, a challenge, and began to advance, slowly, deliberately, cutting off Jasper's escape route towards the trees. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, a chilling reminder of his pampered past, when the gravest danger was an empty food bowl. But then, as Brutus lunged, a strange calm washed over Jasper. He remembered the lion, the majestic creature on the screen, its unyielding gaze, its inherent power. He remembered Mitten's lessons, the raw survival instinct, the resilience forged in the harsh alleys. Something shifted deep within him. The fear didn't vanish entirely, but it was overshadowed by a surge of adrenaline, a fierce protective energy. This was his territory now, his park, and he would not yield. Instead of fleeing, Jasper stood his ground. His fur bristled, his tail lashed, and a sound he barely recognized erupted from his own throat. It wasn't a meow, not even a hiss. It was a guttural, rattling growl, a sound born of ancient instincts, a sound that held the raw, untamed power of the wild. It was his roar. Brutus, taken aback by this unexpected defiance from a relatively small cat, paused. The growl was not just a sound. It was an expression of pure, unadulterated will, a declaration of independence and strength. As Brutus hesitated, Jasper didn't wait. He moved with lightning speed, not to attack head-on, but to distract, to confuse. He darted between the dog's legs, claws raking lightly across its belly, then scrambled up the nearest tree trunk in a blur of ginger fur. From his perch, he glared down at the baffled Brutus, his eyes gleaming with a newfound ferocity. The dog, disoriented and perhaps sensing a deeper, untamable spirit in the small cat, let out a frustrated bark and eventually, with a final resentful glance, turned and slunk back into the thicket. Jasper remained in the tree for a long time, his body trembling, but not from fear. It was the aftershock of adrenaline, the powerful reverberations of his own inner roar. He had faced the ultimate challenge, and he had not only survived, but he had stood his ground, asserting his place in the wild. The pampered city cat was truly gone. In his place stood a creature forged by concrete and nature, a true urban wildcat, his spirit echoing the might of the lion he had once only dreamed of. The confrontation with Brutus marked a profound turning point for Jasper. It wasn't just a victory over a physical threat. It was a triumph of spirit, a definitive declaration of his transformation. The roar he had found within himself was not just a sound. It was a potent force of self-reliance, courage, and an undeniable connection to the wild heart that beat within him. He was no longer a cat defined by a comfortable past, nor merely a survivor of the city's harsh realities. He was a master of his domain, a creature who had bridged the gap between two worlds. His days took on a new rhythm, a blend of wild freedom and quiet contemplation. He continued to patrol the park, his senses attuned to every rustle and scent, his movements fluid and purposeful. The small creatures of the park, sensing his presence, now treated him with a mix of respect and cautious acceptance. He still hunted, not with desperation, but with the honed skill of a true predator, ensuring his sustenance while maintaining the delicate balance of the ecosystem he was now a part of. He found a favored den, a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient oak, lined with soft leaves, and moss, a sanctuary that felt more like home than any velvet cushion ever had. Occasionally, the scent of Eleanor would waft into the park, carried on the breeze. He would sometimes see her walking along the paved paths, her gaze still wistful, perhaps searching. There were moments when a pang of nostalgia would stir within him, a fleeting memory of soft hands and gentle words. But the pull of his wild life was stronger. He had chosen his path, and while he harbored no resentment, he knew he could not return to the confines of a penthouse. His spirit was too vast now, his need for freedom too ingrained. He was no longer a pet. He was a free spirit, an independent soul. Yet, Jasper never completely abandoned his connection to humanity. He became a familiar sight to the early morning joggers and the old women who fed pigeons. They saw him, not as a stray, but as the magnificent ginger cat of the park, a creature of quiet dignity and undeniable presence. Sometimes a child would cautiously approach, extending a hand, and Jasper, with a surprising gentleness, would allow a brief touch, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that still existed, albeit on his terms. He had learned that true wildness wasn't about shunning all contact. It was about choosing when and how to engage, about maintaining one's autonomy. As the seasons turned, Jasper's fur grew thicker, his muscles more defined. His emerald eyes, once filled with longing, now held a deep, knowing wisdom. He had journeyed from the soft meows of a pampered kitten to the fierce, silent roar of an urban wildcat. He had found his strength not in the absence of fear, but in facing it, not in luxury, but in resilience. Not in confinement, but in the boundless embrace of the city's hidden wilderness. His life was a testament to the untamed spirit that lies within us all, waiting for the call, waiting for the moment to break free and discover its own unique roar. And as he watched the sunrise paint the sky over the city and the park, Jasper knew his adventure was not over. It was merely a new dawn filled with the promise of endless wild possibilities.